Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Labour Justice Barometer podcast. I'm Aisha Adam.
And I'm Debbie Collier.
And we're your hosts today on the Labour Justice Barometer. Welcome back to the Labour Justice Barometer. In today's episode, we focus on the 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children campaign. The 16 Days of Activism campaign is a United Nations campaign which takes place annually from the 25th of November, which is the International Day of No Violence Against Women, to the 10th of December, being the International Human Rights Day. South Africa experiences some of the world's highest level of gender-based violence, with the rate at which women are killed being reported as 5 times higher than the global average. Tragically, 15 females are murdered in South Africa daily, which alarmingly is reported as a rise of almost 34% on last year. Last week, Friday, women were urged to withdraw from the economy for one day, the G20 Women's Shutdown, and a 15-minute line occurred at noon in at least 15 locations in honor of the 15 lives lost to GBV every day. Extraordinarily, this year's campaign signals a watershed moment where the step was taken to declare gender-based violence a national disaster. Debbie, what does it mean to have GBV declared a national disaster?
So, Asha, it means that the Disaster Management Act of 2002 is invoked, which sounds like a positive step. And of course, national disasters can be things like pandemics, rioting, social unrest, a national disaster because of a drought, a national disaster because of extreme weather events. So we've seen the Disaster Management Act being invoked, in recent years for some of the reasons that I've mentioned, and it should signal the ability for government to coordinate more effectively, efficiently, to release resources and capacity and funding to address a crisis. And I haven't really had an opportunity fully to have a look at what was gazetted in terms of GBV last week, Aisha. So it remains to be seen how this will play out. But what is a bit concerning is a notice in government's media release around this saying, importantly, this classification does not invoke emergency powers. Instead, it reinforces and strengthens the systems already in place, binding together key initiatives such as, and then it lists various initiatives that have been ongoing for a number of years. So how effective this will be, I'm not sure, but civil society has been pushing for gender-based violence for many years to be declared a national disaster. So I'm sure we'll see unfolding in the next few weeks and months about whether or not this is an effective mechanism to address GBV.
Well, what are the ways to push back then? What does it take within our homes, workplaces, and institutions to actually push back against this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Asha, it's a multifaceted approach, and we can take a look now at some recent developments and interventions, and I think they range from relatively unintrusive policy developments right up to more extreme steps, where women are arming themselves with firearms for protection. So I'll take a look at, the first recent development in the policy space. I think we have previously discussed our code under the Employment Equity Act to address violence or to eliminate harassment in the world of work. But we've also recently seen in the media cases of sexual harassment within the judiciary, sadly not exempted from the scourge. And the judiciary does not fall under employment, so the Employment Equity Act would not apply, and the code would not apply. Earlier, a couple of months ago, I think in August, a new sexual harassment policy for the South African judiciary was published. So this is a very positive step, at least whether or not it will be effective remains to be seen. But at least now we do have a policy that applies to judicial offices and covers, the professional settings, courtrooms, online interactions, and social events involving people from the judiciary. So that's a low-key, least intrusive, but yeah, stepping up to other recent interventions. Over to you, Asha.
Well, I think the next, step is not, we don't have to look too far. And, our listeners might have remembered this from our first episode of season 2, is the development of digital tools such as the Resilient Workplace Institute's Digital Harassment Risk Assessment Tool, which we actually discussed with Hanley Wessels when looking at how a digital risk assessment tool is actually tackling toxic workplaces. What makes this tool exciting and important is its potential to be scaled up and its use to identify risk and therefore its preventative function. I mean, it can potentially identify risk before it escalates and instead of waiting for a complaint when we know that this is, things are very heavily underreported, in and out of the workplace. So one of the good things about this is that it is also data-driven proactive, which I think is an approach that can motivate change and enable organizations to identify and target interventions where they are most needed. But I think it does require, leadership buy-in. But Debbie, is there any other leadership tools that you could say?
So maybe not a leadership tool, Asha, but certainly a community or a society tool, sticking with the development of digital tools. A recent, not so recent, but in the last 5 years, and I've had good fortune to see this demonstrated in its early development stage. It's now called GRIT, and the GRIT mobile application, unfortunately, like many of these other interventions, was born out of tragedy. In this case, in 2020, the GRIT founder, her 19-year-old niece, who was 9 months pregnant at the time, was murdered in an act of gender-based violence. And that loss really catalyzed her to push for the development of this mobile app, and she's been central to the development. And it's gone through a number of iterations, and it is now GRIT. We'll leave links for our listeners and really would encourage particularly vulnerable women who find themselves in positions where they are exposed to increased levels of harassment or violence. This application, it's very survivor-centered. It revolutionizes how GBV can be documented and reported and responded to, in real time. So it's an app, but it has three tech solutions in the app. It has a chatbot, Zuki AI chatbot, which allows for anonymous and accessible information for services, and sharing with women who have questions and queries. But it has a crisis WhatsApp helpline for immediate response time. The developers have various partnerships with security and SAPs and other immediate interventions and services that are needed. And it also has the ability so it can connect survivors to the professionals and legal assistance that they need, but it has the ability, importantly, to store, to keep evidence and to document GBV in real time that can later be used to assist victims when they seek services. So I think it's a very exciting intervention that can potentially really empower women who have been victims to seek help and to actually be able to access resources, confident that that they are supported.
You're listening to the Labour Justice Barometer, and we'll be right back. So aside from, all the other interventions and developments being extremely, incredible stuff, this is probably my most favorite one. Debbie, the BBC recently reported on South African women actually arming themselves against gender violence. And in their article, which we will link to our listeners, it refers to Lynette Oxley, who created Girls on Fire in 2015. That's 10 years ago, to coincide with the 16 days of activism in that year. And what Girls on Fire does is it helps women protect themselves through self-defense and gun ownership, as it is still legal to actually own a firearm in South Africa for self-defense purposes, and of course if a person has a valid license. Most of the women in the group have been raped, attacked, robbed, or experience some level of violence. And what Girls on Fire does is provides women with a way to reclaim a sense of safety and agency, which is, very necessary for women to participate in society, the world of work, and to support their families and communities. Obviously, women should never have to be driven to armed self-defense because the state fails to protect them is the main issue. And I think responsible firearm training is becoming more and more common because women no longer trust that help will arrive in time. And it's a really stark reality, and we did give the statistics at the start of the episode, but it is women's way of pushing back to help them feel some form of empowerment and control.
Asha, yes, thanks. I share your sense of excitement around this development of self-defense and women arming themselves. If we think about 15 women dying daily in the country, that is a crisis when we talk about genocide against white Afrikaner farmers. I don't know what the stats are that are thrown about in that context, but it certainly seems a sensible and reasonable response for women to take some agency and control. So it will be very interesting to see how Girls on Fire is able to provide some form of empowerment against gender-based violence. But I think, Asha, I'm sure you would agree with me that the GBV crisis in South Africa puts us really into the red end of the labor justice barometer.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really just remains to be seen which of these strategies and interventions can really shift the needle and turn the tide.
I mean, I think they can, Debbie. I think, look, none of these interventions could ever work in isolation, but I do think it's a combination of prevention, proper support, protection, and accountability that will ultimately shift that barometer towards the green rather than the red.
Yeah, thanks, Asha. I hope you're right. Certainly, we can't just give up, and we need to continue innovating and finding ways to push back. So thank you, Asha, for a great conversation, and to our listeners for tuning in today. Of course, we'll put all the links to the interventions and mobile apps and technological tools that we've mentioned in today's episode, and encourage our listeners also, to do what you can in the spaces where you are. And that we should not be complicit bystanders, to this national crisis. It requires a coordinated, sustained action, and really all of us need to be a part of that. Asha, thank you again for a great conversation, and take care and have a good weekend.
Thanks, Debbie.
This podcast is not intended to constitute legal advice.